So when we facilitate race stories with our participants, we ask them to think of a time when they were a target, a complicit bystander, or an oppressor in an experience with systemic racism. We ask them to think of 4 questions. So they journal about it first, and then we share. And the 4 questions are: where are you? Who else is there? What is happening? And how do you feel about it? And it's really important for people to stay in the present tense, to remember what was happening in that moment and what you were feeling. When we share these stories, it's important to think of the different places that people are coming from when they share. For people of color, it's important to know that we're always careful when we talk about racism, especially with white people. It's important to know that a lot of times we have our own internalized oppression about ourselves or other people of color, and that is part of white supremacy. Whenever we as people of color share about racism, we know we're taking a calculated risk. And it's rarely safe, but we do it because we believe that it's important to speak our truth, and we don't want the world to erase our stories. Oftentimes when we share our stories, we want to be in solidarity with other people of color whom we know also experience systemic racism. And it's really important also when you're having conversations about race with people of color that you understand that there's a cost for sharing that, and letting us know, what are we getting in return for sharing our stories, our pain? What expectation is there? It's important to know that what might be an intellectual exercise for someone else to hear can be a very personal and painful thing for us to share. For multiracial people of color and white people, there are different considerations. People who are multiracial can feel connected to families of color and their white families and their communities. Multiracial white people have often been erased from conversations about race, and they can feel invisible by both people of color and by white people. And again, that is part of the oppression of white supremacy. It's important to realize that multiracial white people are not half or part of anything, but they are whole people. There's also power and privileges that can come from being part of a white family, or because of having lighter skin privilege. Multiracial white people need to use their voices to be in solidarity with people of color and justice-seeking white allies. When white people share stories about systemic oppression, it's important that they name specific ways in which they have participated from and benefited from white supremacy, especially when they don't think they did or wish that it wasn't so. It's especially true to name that when you don't think it applies to you. It's important for white people to name specifically their role in maintaining white supremacy and keeping that structure in place. White people, please recognize that tears, silence, and fragility in the presence of people of color who are often tasked with caring for fragile people, that perpetuates white supremacy and white privilege, and that can be an act of violence in itself. White people, please remember to listen to others and to connect to your own feelings, not give up when you feel overwhelmed, but to keep going. Be aware of the filters that whiteness asks you to put up, such as skepticism, rationalizing, minimalizing. It's important to believe the experiences that you hear. And then finally, it's not just about collecting stories or hearing about other people's pain. The most important thing you can do is to commit to justice for people of color.